How's it going, family? This is Colin with the Music City Star Factory. I really want to talk to you guys and expand on an idea which I brought up in our video about compression. It's actually using null tests to figure out the true character of any sound effect or any post-processing effects that we might have. Ableton wants you to think that everything they make is super transparent and perfect. We can actually pull out a lot of artifacts and really hear exactly what effects are adding by doing this null test. So let me show you exactly how to set this up. So for our first sound here, I've just got white noise. And if you're unfamiliar with what a null test is, basically all I'm going to do is group a utility and then duplicate it. And then we're going to invert the left and right phase on that utility by clicking these two buttons right here. And now you'll see that even though I'm feeding audio information and a completely random white noise into this group, because we have two signals with the phase of one completely inverted, we actually get nothing. So this is called phase cancellation. This is when you have an equal but opposite sound wave to your source sound that completely matches the phase, the amplitude, the timing of it. And so when these two sounds collide, we actually get silence because they completely neutralize each other out. So before, what I was doing was I was showing you how this affected compression. So let me grab maybe a drum loop real quick. And I'll set up our null test once again, just to show you how easy it is. And I was applying compression so that we could actually hear exactly the gain reduction on the sound. Let's step back for a moment and listen to exactly what we're hearing. So knowing that our sound is completely canceled, we have complete silence with no other effects. If we add any effects to our sound, we're hearing the difference of what those effects are doing compared to the completely dry signal. Because the dry signal is what's getting canceled, and the difference is going to be what we end up bringing back. This way, we're able to hear the nuances, especially with the attack and release on this compressor. Really see how much more attitude this compressor has when we turn off this ratio. And then now when we take the compressor out of the group and turn off the group, we actually hear the dry signal with the compression, no phase cancellation. So that was pretty much the principle of the first video that I brought up, but I actually want to bring this up because we can use this tool to find a lot of really interesting information regarding some of our effects. The first one that I'd like to bring attention to is shifter. You can hear how when I play the audio, it should completely cancel out, and shifter isn't doing anything at all. We're not changing the pitch at all. We don't have the dry wet in a 50% position. This should not be affecting our signal at all, but we're actually hearing all the artifacts that come from shifter. And if I go ahead and play with shifter, we would hear the artifacts a lot more like we would anticipate. We can also pull up an EQ afterwards and really see exactly what's going on. What's odd is that we're kind of getting these notches. And I'm not exactly sure why shifter is programmed this way or why that happens, but it's something to be aware of. You can see even if my shifter is in pitch mode, we're still getting some granulizing happening. But you would almost want it to be transparent if you weren't doing any pitch shifting. So again, really interesting. I think it's really important not to rely on this. I think it's really important to understand your source signal and how your effect is affecting and adding to that. And by knowing exactly what to listen for by using this method, you can eventually hear those nuances without having to throw everything into this null test rack. Developing that skill makes you a much better producer than someone who's going to throw everything into a null rack every time they want to tweak something. And it's also just going to give you a more nuanced result because you'll be listening to the sum of the source and the effect and understanding how they interplay and listening to the whole of it versus just listening to the effect and making your decisions that way. I think it's a lot better to know exactly what the effect is doing, train your ear to hear it, and then you can really go ahead and add that effect and drive it as much as you can or start breaking rules with those effects because you know exactly what it's adding and what it's not. Redux is another one of those effects where you would think with the rate and the bits all the way up that you wouldn't get any signal to come through. But you can actually hear this changing a lot of the high-end information. This null rack can be a really cool way to get different flavors out of your effects. You can see that right now, the Redux in this rack is making a really aggressive tone, not exactly distorted, but very crunchy. But if I were to take this out of the rack, it's just beyond what I would really want for the sound. Same goes with amp. You can get some really, really cool tones that you wouldn't normally get out of amp. Versus, we're really hearing the distortion and the EQ curve that this amp wants to put onto everything. And also really when that tom comes in, how crunchy it gets. And it's almost more fun to get these new flavors of amp that we wouldn't have before because it wants to sum everything after. EQ3, you can see exactly the phase crossover or the notches that we get from having these 3 bands. You can really see these little valleys move, especially as I move around these frequency crossover points. By not having linear phase crossover over these bands, if I actually go ahead and duplicate EQ3 many, many times, you'll see that I almost get this vocoder band effect. And this is actually us adding tons and tons and tons of phase crossovers, which if I were to take this and pull this out of the rack, you'll actually see that we get an effect a lot like the kilohertz disperser. Take this a step further, I'm actually just going to add macros to these phase crossover points. And duplicate this a ton of times again. And just randomize these macros. You can definitely get some crazy, crazy sounds if you really push this. I've got this FFT texture effect, max for live effect, that does a little bit of FFT sorting and scrambling. And by throwing it into the rack, normally it doesn't sound too interesting, but by throwing it into this rack, I can actually really bring out the tone which I'm looking to find with this sound. Yeah, so anyway, you can get crazy tones, crazy textures. I think that this is a gorgeous effect if you can really learn how to manipulate it and use it for your own. So much sound design to pull out of this. On top of just like double checking your work, cleaning things up, you can get super creative with it and just bring a whole new voice to effects that you wouldn't have normally had before. And it's something that I don't see anyone really talk about. And with that, I'll leave you guys to it. Happy sound designing, happy producing. And feel free to write me any questions in the comments, and I'd be happy to answer. All right, thank you so much. Goodbye.